is truly enjoyable is that they are both progressive and regressive. They are progressive because they accumulate very quickly new ideas, and then those ideas are spurred on by a kind of a natural competitiveness. They're regressive because they try to formalise people's place in cities for convenience, to make them tidier. They're regressive because they're controlled by the powerful. But they're progressive because actually, finally, the powerful can't control everything in a city. And that's why you have this wonderful underground, nomadic opportunity, often fueled by immigration, to insist that change happens because cities are uncontrollable. And the uncontrollable spaces is where I think artists are emerging again. And again, I think that's what makes art much livelier than art appearing in the controlled spaces. And art, I think, must reflect the lives of the less powerful and must speak on behalf and preferably with the less powerful, and in fact evoke the possibility for the less powerful to do the speaking. And you can't do that if you're always operating in controlled spaces. So that is another reason why I think the opportunity for cities to enjoy their lack of system, to find these doors and walls that are apparently inappropriate for art to happen in, that's when you're really onto something, I think. I like the idea as well in designing life that you're saying to audiences that this is a new experience and the rules haven't been made yet, so you're a rule maker and you can be a rule breaker while you're doing that. That, I think, gives ownership. It also has that ingredient of fun. I mean, you can see that on the screen, the ingredient of fun. And even though the Battle of Orgreave that Jeremy Deller created, you couldn't really call that fun, because it was a sort of homage and investigation of a particularly cruel and vicious part of British political life. Nevertheless, it had a sort of real life sense of action that wasn't imitating something. It was actually the experience was really happening that day. It was a recreation, but it was its own terrifying experience. And I think, again, the public can feel that as a real thing, not a second-hand thing. I would like to just say that there can be an over-fetishization of cities. You know, that we talk about cities as if we are completely enthralled with them. And actually, there's the whole of the rest of the country and the rest of the world. And in fact, cities really are on a constant rotating framework of people entering them who don't come from those cities, bringing new ideas, often ideas that have been formed in much more thoughtful environments, simpler environments. And so I think it's always a mistake politically to fetishize the city. You know, one should enjoy its lawlessness and its privileges, but you know, not mistakenly think that they're the hub of creativity. I don't think that's true. Then I wanted to talk just very briefly about how the human imagination always counterbalances. Luckily, I think, as I'm an optimist, but I mean, I think it counterbalances problems of scale. So, you know, we're now at the stage where you have cities that are mega cities, like Mumbai, London, Tokyo. I mean, they're just uncontrollably huge, really. And it is interesting how at that point humanity invents greater levels of intimacy. I mean, I would say that YouTube is a level of intimacy which has always been invented in reaction to scale. And I think that artists looking for tiny gestures within cities is the appropriate reaction to scale. Because if the laws of physics are to be believed, then a tiny action does gather momentum to become a major gesture. It's just we're not quite sure of how that journey happens. But if art is an act of faith, then these small gestures in massive cities, these small gestures of intimacy in massive cities, they gather momentum and they have a power. So you have to have faith that that's possible. Because obviously one's reaction to cities sometimes is to do, you know, Lady Gaga spectacle, and that is an appropriate gesture for some purposes. But it's almost impossible to do art at that scale. and therefore you have to have faith that art is at a tiny scale still works within cities, and I do believe that. Just a couple of things, which is that one of the things that I've been working on myself, which is a project called Metal, which are spaces in places. They happen to be cities. I mean, they're entirely about the idea that hunch matters, that you follow an idea of a hunch. Somebody has an idea, you have to make it happen. And it's really about connecting humans around the idea that all people, all ideas have a future if you give them some practical impetus, some practical help. And I think one of the things that artists are becoming in modern life are connectors. I mean, Andy talked about the fact that they become town planners, they become people who design parks, they become landscape gardeners with participation projects, they become fashion and festival designers. I think that idea of artists becoming connectors for their communities is the very, very exciting thing. Because I go back to the idea that art is about thinking and feeling. It's not about product. Product is the second part of it. So in this sort of way that art in cities has often been thought of as a method of adding decoration to regeneration, I think we have to keep remembering that art is there to adding